Welcome to our panel. My name is Eli Fathi. I'm the CEO of MindBridge AI. I'm very pleased to be the moderator of this panel. We have a few individuals here that are rock stars in their area, and you're going to enjoy the next 75 minutes. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start with a brief overview about what the state of AI is globally right now, just in high level, and then I'll dive in, talk to each individual member of the panel about their experiences and what they do. So let's start to look at where we are now. Want to.
Cool.
We have some technical problem.
Let's talk about it. This is why you sleep okay.
I could just get a Skype call to run flawlessly. I'd be happy.
I can't even get Skype.
Okay. Okay. I can do without it. So, no slides. So let's look at the state of the where we are now in terms of technology.
Just when he decided he was.
So, one of the most important elements that I've come across is Andrew Ng from Baidu, the chief scientist, compares what's going to happen with AI in the next 30 years with what electricity has done to the world. This is a big statement. If you consider what happened with electricity and the impact of our life. So if we're going to look at this kind of situation, let's consider some facts about that. PwC did a study a year ago, and they identified that the impact, the accretive impact of AI to the world GDP is going to be close to $16 trillion. And the expectation is that North America and China will be the main beneficiaries. Canada is one of them. Considering that Canada GDP is 1.9 trillion, imagine that if we can get an accretive, let's say just 10% of that, another 2 trillion to our economy, the impact that that will do on our lives. So where do you generate this kind of accretive additional revenues? It's going to come from new product, new services, and basically demand from the consumer for additional product and services. Why now? AI has been around for the past, since 1955. There was a document called Augmenting Human Intelligence in 1955. And those days, there were really two schools of thought. One, that AI is going to be utilizing cobot, augmenting the human intelligence. And the other one was the singularity, where a machine will take over, the rise of the new machines. But why now? Why in the last 3-4 years that we are seeing this kind of rapid change in AI? Really, if you look at the inflection point that happened in 2014, when Google bought DeepMind for 400 million pounds. And this was really the beginning of what they call the spring that started this big expansion in AI. But there are other reasons why AI became prevalent in the last 3 years. There's the availability of cloud computing, AWS, Azure, Bluemix, all of the Google Cloud. We have a lot of open source technology, Sparks and other technology stacks. And the big element is what before people consider as a curse the big data, this is the food that really feeds the AI, the labeled data. This is the food that all algorithm needs in order to generate the machine learning part of it. And of course, whenever you see of interest, VCs are not far behind. So what is going to be the impact of AI? So if you look at this curve, this is normally is what Michael Porter defined as a standard product life cycle. You start on the left-hand side. If you look at the on the left-hand side of the graph, the adoption of any product or service is very slow. Then it rises rapidly. It reaches a peaking point, inflection point, and then it drops. Now let's look at AI superimposed on that. This is what AI is going to do. So we just started 3 years ago, and we are starting to see where we're going to get to inflection point. Notice that the curve in blue is a lot higher. Why? Because what we're going to see that AI is going to provide a lot more value and a lot more, is going to displace a lot of existing product and services. And this is some of the concern that people have about AI. So let's talk about that. I don't know if any one of you read the book by Klaus Schwab, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. So if you look historically, we had the steam engine, we had the industrialization, then we have the computer, and now we have the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And Klaus Schwab, who is also the chair and founder of the Davos Economic Forum, identified that 25 different hypotheses of what will happen in the year 2025. And Klaus Schwab, if you read about him, the people that are in his circles are people like Sheryl Sandberg, all of the CEO of big organizations. And they asked this expert to identify 25 hypotheses and ask them, what do you think will happen? So for example, one hypothesis is that by the year 2025, we're going to have the first implantable mobile phone in our body. By the year 2025, 10% of all our clothing will be wearable IoT, connected to the internet. By the year 2025, we're going to have the first car that is going to be produced with a 3D printer. And what's relevant to us is the issue of the impact on our life and white-collar work. So one of the hypotheses was related to white-collar jobs. In this case, it was about audits. And they're saying 30% of all audits will be done by a machine. That's scary, right? So what is the impact on society? The fear is the technology unemployment. And that was coined by John Keynes in 1930. And what is the issue is replacement and displacement of personnel. Now, why this is important now to governments? Because in the last 20 years, robotics have taken out the blue-collar skills, labor. In the last few years, automation have taken some of the low-level skills. If you go to McDonald's, you have a tablet. If you go to a company, you don't have receptionists anymore. And now AI is going to address the white collar. So it's very scary. Now, historically, we have not seen that case. But it is different this year. Historically, actually, there were more jobs created because of a new product, new services, and new companies. I just want to finish on one thing. That's a controversial topic that I'm going to ask the panel about. Are we seeing the rise of the machines, or are we actually seeing where AI is going to help and augment what we are doing? So let's now stop here, and I'll ask the panel to their views about it. I would like to have each of the panelists introduce herself and himself, and then we'll start with questions.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Witherspoon. I'm the CEO of Immersive Data Labs. We're a venture-backed machine learning research company based in Ottawa. And my colleague on my left is Isar, so I'll let her.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Isar. I work with Sam. I did my master's and PhD on training neural networks, so that's where I work with. I worked with speech and image in my research back then when I was at school. Then I worked a little bit with biomedical signals, same tools, the data was biomedical signals. And now, again, work with neural networks with Sam, and this time it's natural language processing, text. So I've been in this field for a while, but different sorts of data, so to speak.
Hi, good morning. I'm Valerie Turner. I'm VP Technology for MD Financial Management. We're a wealth management firm for Canadian physicians and their families located in Ottawa. We have just about $50 billion in assets under management, and if you follow the news, we were recently acquired by Scotiabank last week for $2.6 billion. I run the technology practice, which includes disruptive technologies, so robotics, humanoid robotics, AI, and blockchain.
Hi, I'm Tara Denham. I'm the Director of Democracy at Global Affairs Canada, and that includes a digital inclusion lab. So we're one of the innovation hubs within Global Affairs. What brings me here is that we are looking at a lot of issues around artificial intelligence and human rights and the impact on human rights, and thinking through that from a policy perspective.
I'm Sri Ramarajan, and I'm a Canada Research Chair in Sensor Systems in Department of Systems and Computer Engineering here in Carleton. So I joined Carleton in 2015, and I came from Defense Research and Development Canada, where I was a defense scientist. And my research area is in the general area of signal processing, focusing on signal and data analytics, and also applied machine learning.
Thank you, panel. So as Aladdin song goes, it's a whole new world. How is the world changed in your perspective in the last 3 years, and how is it going to change over the next 10, 15 years? Let's start with you.
Well, if we look back, the world has always been changing. So long time back, we started with agricultural economy, and then we moved on with industrial revolution. And yes, we had all these issues, thinking that we will all lose our jobs. And then we went into the communication era in the past century, and now we are in the data-driven economy, where data is the fuel of the economy. So now we are moved on, where we looked at different aspects, both from the perspectives of improving an economy in many different ways. So now we are in a stage where the data is what is driving us. So if there is no data, and the data is also connecting us. So we are in a connected world which is driven by data, and we have become slaves to data, as a matter of fact. And that's where the world is going. So as we look at things, in this era of data, we are focusing on things that the people need, both front and center, and that's where the whole thing is going now.
In your world of academia, do you see any differences?
Well, let me ask now a question to myself. What is illiteracy now? So previously, illiteracy was not knowing certain things. Now illiteracy is not knowing how to use the data. And so from my perspective, even from education perspective, so for previously education was, in the olden days, it was where you go to a person whom we call as guru, and then you learn from them. So it's only for elite, one set of people. And then we started having the schools where we have anybody can go and then could learn. And now it has gone to a place where you don't even need to go to the university. You can sit at home and then still learn. And that is the MOOCs, and which is Coursera is offering. So even from the education perspective, if I look at it, there has been a drastic change from where we started, all because of how we connected ourselves and how both electronics and communication has driven us. Now we have a lot of data available on the connected world, even for education. So per se, everything is available, but then I would like to put a quote here, which I noted from T.S. Eliot. Even though we are in this stage, we need to ask this question: where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? And where is the knowledge? We lost any information. So I stopped there.
Tara, you were in the world of governments. How did the world change 3 years ago, and how do you see the changes, both the way that you deliver services and the consumer, the citizen of the country?
So I think what we've seen is, I would agree, of course, it's a data-driven world, and I think over the last couple of years, what many of us have seen is the manipulation or use of data in many different ways, and the power to do nudging of populations, to have political influence in countries beyond your borders, taking that information, being able to map out communities in great detail, and being able to influence those communities. So from a perspective of foreign affairs, that has really shocked a lot of people in the last couple of years, particularly in some elections that we've seen in various countries. So that's really bring to the fore, and I think really enlighten people that we have to start paying better attention to what this means to be in a data-driven world, and particularly as policymakers. Where do I see us going? I think that, again, I work in this area of human rights and freedoms and inclusion. And I'm a big advocate to think, we just have to think differently. The global dynamics of international affairs has shifted significantly. Where are the push and pull on human rights taking place? It's a lot about data and how data is being used and who's going to have access to data. How are decisions being made about what our world is, how our world is going to be impacted? It's different, completely different playing fields than what a lot of policymakers would have been educated on or what we're familiar with. So I see it's really pushed us into a different space. A lot of people are a little shocked by it, but I do see that this is the reality. We have to figure out how to talk to each other and learn from each other.
Do you see that the government will offer our citizens different way of services with AI?
Definitely. So the Canadian government is looking at this, and there's standards that are going to be coming out from Treasury Board about how government uses artificial intelligence, which will be really interesting. But as some of the conversations that we've had, as government, when you provide services to your population, you have to be able to explain why you made decisions to provide those services. And so that's been something that you have to think through as a government provider, because I'm sure it will come out in a conversation about explainability behind AI. And so, will we all be replaced by computers? I think it can augment and create efficiencies, but there's a lot of debate around how far should that go. And as a government, when you're starting to provide services, i.e. how are the decisions going to be made to receive healthcare provision or education resources or any of the major services that governments provide, is there a threshold by which the impact of that decision on humans and populations, does it meet a certain threshold that there has to be a human in the loop? And these are sort of the discussions to make sure that you can, as a government, explain the decisions that you've made.
Valerie, you are in the wealth management financial institution sector. How is the impact in your sector?
So I think it is a whole new world the last few years, and it is a bit about the technology, where these technologies are maturing to the point where we can start to use them. The larger context is the social context, where individuals have an expectation around personalization that can't be met through traditional channels. So we used to joke a bit about the Starbucks experience and how do you have that Starbucks experience for your clients, because that's their expectation. And then we see the emergence of tech companies, so Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, and their interest in financial services and their ability to understand folks very, very well, because they just have tremendous amounts of data on you. They know where you go. They know what you buy. They know how much you can afford to spend on toilet paper every month, on your subscribe and save. They're starting to offer financial products to pre-financial clients. So Amazon's looking at offering financial vehicles to teenagers so that they can buy stuff where the traditional banks have stayed away from that market in terms of lending. We don't lend, or financial services companies don't lend to 12-year-olds. But this is something they want to get a deeper and deeper understanding of their clients to be able to bring financial products to them. Amazon is starting to do payment plans for large products in the UK. So if you buy a sofa, you can have a payment plan. And they know reliably that you can pay for it because they know how much money you've typically spent with them, more so than a bank ever would. So we see that, and we also see, just from a social construct, in AI, the misappropriation of what folks call data. So we'll call it dark data, or we'll call it unstructured data. But data is typically information gathered for a specific purpose that you can put some kind of frame around. So your social insurance number, I know what it is so that I can give you a tax receipt. Stuff on Twitter, Instagram, these are advertising platforms. And when we take that data and we pretend that that's data that we then can use for other things, it starts to get very, very interesting. So we had a chat ahead of time, and I don't mean to derail the panel, but if you let AI loose on YouTube and it tries to figure out what a cat is, and it comes up with a fox, and you say, no, 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 that's a fox, he's got pointier ears and a longer nose, try again. It's using information that it's finding that is fairly benign. If you take AI and put it loose on the internet and say, show me what a member of a board of directors looks like. Who tells it that all members of board of directors are not men over 40 who are white? So what is the data that we're using for all of these things? And I think that's an interesting conversation. It goes a bit to what you were saying, is that we have data in our organizations, things like spending patterns, financial amounts, all those kinds of things. And then there's just the jungle of information that is out on the internet that folks in our practice of AI are going out and using, and I think we have some ethics around that.
So, Isar and Samuel, you're in the legal side, and you look at different other areas as well. So what is your experience in this area?
Okay, so I'm going to start. So, yeah, I think the idea of learning from data was around for a long time, and it's not new, really. Long time ago, we would, like, if you want to explain a complex and a complicated phenomena, it's really hard to explain it in terms of explicit rules. So another way of doing it would be collecting some data, looking at patterns, looking at correlations, and try to understand that data. So this idea was around for a long time, and we would call it statistics. But what really happened in terms of the technology in the past 1 or 2 decades was that now we have much better tools to perform that learning from data. Maybe what I've done in my PhD is a very good indicator of how fast this change was. 10 years ago, I had just started my PhD, and the topic was training a neural network that can recognize faces, recognize emotions, and generate faces with different emotions, which is a very common, very easy problem to solve right now. But it took me 5 years to train that neural network back then because of all the complexities, because of the hardware that we had back then, because of the algorithms. But now you can do the same project in 1 or 2 weeks, maybe, if you're expert, which makes my thesis useless and embarrassing right now. But this is really what happened. Now we have all these open source technology out there. It's already built, and we can build our own technology on top of that. This is what we have so far, and what we have now. What has never changed is that whoever has more knowledge will win the game. And when there is such a big source of knowledge, which is big data, and when you have this kind of technology that you can learn from this data, so why not? So I think that's why the data is driving most of our industries now.
So I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. My background, I was an engineer, then a lawyer, and I was going to become a patent agent. I abandoned that pretty quickly to do this. But we focus a lot on explainability. Seems to be like an overarching theme that people fixate on when we talk about the ethics of artificial intelligence or machine learning. And I guess I would flip that around and I would suggest that having sat with a judge and conducted judicial review of human decision makers at a scale that people don't often appreciate in Canada, humans are horrendous at explaining their decisions. So like, think about it yourself. Why are you all here today? And give me the reason. And I guarantee you can't think of every reason. Now make the question more complex. I did a bit of immigration work when I was sitting with the judge on the court. Get an immigration officer to explain why they rejected someone at the border. So why did CBSA turn someone back at the border? There's a whole host of answers that they give. Often they don't give any. And so to sort of back that back out to the sort of machine learning angle, at least I can point to the historical information and say, this is the trend, or this is what we observed historically. I'm not saying it addresses all of the bias issues that are inherently built into the system, but if we can't address them as human beings first, all of the bias that's already baked in, racial profiling and policing, discrimination for board of directors, we already have that problem. Machine learning helps us identify it, would be another way to describe it. If it's always suggesting white 40-plus-year-old males, that's a pretty stark contrast. The last example I'll give you is last night, we're actually in the midst of training a model to show you guys some bias in action. I spent my evening downloading images from IMDb, and so my goal was men and women under 35 and men and women over 35. So if you go to the most popular celebrities right now on IMDb, and you go through and try to fill those categories, you'll find that women under 35, you'll be done by like page 10. Men over 35, you'll be done by about page 10. To fill the opposites of those categories, women over 35, men under 35, I was on page 2,100 hunting for 200 examples. So it is like clear as day when you explore information that way, what society's bias really is. Not to mention the fact that I encountered one trans person in that entire data set. I encountered very few people of color. It is like, and it is just horrendous when you look through how stark these contrasts are and how obvious it becomes that when we train that model, it's going to have a preference for white men over the age of 35 and white women under the age of 35. So that would be like a clear as day example. Now, if you extrapolate that to like policing, finance, literally every other industry, the same stuff happens. So we can balance those things provided we're aware of them as a society, but I don't think we acknowledge them well enough right now to begin with.
I would like to move to the next segment. So in my preamble, I talked about the fact that PwC is predicting $15.7 trillion windfall accretive to the economy, but also there is the issues of unemployment, technology unemployment. Historically, it was not the case. What I would like the panel to discuss now, starting with Tara, is what is your opinion in terms of new application, new product, new services, the impact on the consumer, replacement and displacement of people, and are we going to follow historically what happened with that actually generated more wealth or not?
So we always, when we're having these conversations, we always do try and balance ourselves because, of course, looking at human rights, you can get really depressed really fast looking at artificial intelligence. So we do look at the opportunities, and it's been also well regarded that to sort of to address a lot of the global challenges that you see, artificial intelligence could positively influence that to huge degrees, and to reach the sustainable development goals that the UN have set. In fact, we will have to find ways to better leverage technology. And so artificial intelligence, I mean, some of the ones that we've been hearing about are helping to map, helping girls run away from female genital mutilation, and by sites being actually articulated, and they can actually start to track them and find safe places. They're also using it around sort of mapping weather patterns and agricultural production, and this can obviously create improvements in various crop yields around the world. We've already spoken about education and the ability for different communities to gain access to data and information, helping visually impaired. I mean, there's a huge amount of applications. But what we also see, as was just referenced, is when those applications actually have those biases built in and then are applied in different contexts, different global contexts, you can exacerbate social divisions to a greater degree. So if a lot of these applications are being developed by the West, so your statement that 16 trillion is going to be brought in GDP primarily to North America and China, well, that is a lot. That's where a lot of the development is going to be happening, a lot of the drivers between artificial intelligence. And what happens when we then develop that and push it out into the global south and different countries? What's then going to happen with some of those decisions that are made by a rural woman in Kenya that her government's going to decide if she gets services or not based on an algorithm that was developed in North America? I mean, the impacts are quite phenomenal when you start pushing it out. And how do we get more of those voices for people that are going to be impacted by these decisions, particularly across the global south? How do you get them integrated into the AI development to make sure that those algorithms and the data actually reflect the populations that are going to be impacted? So these are some of the issues that we think about, which can be a little depressing by the end of the day, but we try and find solutions. And I can't remember the second part of the question.
Do you see that we are going to buck the trend of technology unemployment, or are we going to have a lot more employment?
Anything that I've heard is that, again, it's going to shift, right? But that the wealth that is created will be greater than any degree in history, targeted and consumed by a smaller and smaller elite. Whereas in the past, as growth, global incomes have increased, there has been millions of people brought out of poverty, but as we move forward, the actual growth, the gap in distribution is actually going to increase as the benefits are derived from primarily certain populations that are driving this industrial revolution. So I do think that the jobs will shift. But even as you were saying, like a lot of the low-level skills will be impacted. I think a lot of people have spoken about that. We're pretty nervous about that in Canada and North America. You'll hear a lot of people talking about that. So what does that mean, again, for all the low-skilled labor around the world? Like, that is a huge impact on global division of wealth, not just in Canada.
So, yeah, I agree with you that there's going to be a shift and a displacement because AI allows us to do both new things and old things at scale. So if you think in the old things at scale, if I can do virtual agents and chatbots, then I can displace call center workers. So that's a pure displacement model. To do new things at scale are things like personalization, where I couldn't do it before at scale. So in the old days, if you went into a clothing store, they might write down the things that you bought and then phone you 2 weeks later and say, you bought this skirt, we have a blouse that just came in, would you like to come and look at it? Obviously, you can't do that at scale. You know how many people you'd need to do that at scale. But Amazon can certainly do that at scale, and they can do that today. So there certainly is net new capabilities that may create some new jobs. There's a displacement. And I think more than that, it's kind of turning every individual into a 24/7 consumer. So anyone who's my age probably remembers that Mr. Dress Up, and there was a lot of controversy if there was an advertisement for a child's toy during Mr. Dress Up, because this was the innocent days where we worried about that. Now we are fed advertising 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on every single platform that we're on. So if you mentioned it, and it's true, if you're on Facebook, that ad is not a happy coincidence that you happen to have looked at something and now you're being fed an ad. Young folks are following on Instagram are walking spokespeople, but they don't have to disclose that. They're paid, $400,000 when they put a product into their Instagram picture. I don't know if you know John McAfee from the antivirus days. He disclosed recently that he will tweet anything for $105,000 a tweet, which includes his whole campaign of cryptocurrency pump and dump scheme that he's got running. So there's absolutely no transparency, absolutely no disclosure. So this shift of jobs is one thing, and I think this shift of how we're treated as human beings is another, that we're viewed as walking wallets. and everyone wants a bigger share of wallet. And how do we turn the corner on that so that there's some return to sanity around individuals understanding how they're being treated and how this data is being used to feed them either a political opinion, a consumer point of view, whatever it is. So maybe there will be a rise of ethicists for AI as a new job where, we have folks that actually spend a lot of time on this and are watchdogs for these companies. But there has to be a shift of some sort, of course, with these technologies.
Yeah, I think just like 10 years ago, we didn't have a job called data scientist, machine learning researcher. We will see a lot of new jobs 10 years from now, now that this technology is taking over many industries, or is playing a role in many industries. There are different places that jobs will be created. One is that the technology that we have so far, the state-of-the-art technology, is big companies are leading these technologies. And most of the open source technologies that are available are based on supervised training because they have all the data in the world, and they don't care about the data, they have the data. And they're building these technologies assuming that they have a lot of data. But the technology is not there yet that can solve all the problems in a general way. So if we really want to use it, we need to customize it to a domain-specific, task-specific problem. So that's where we'll see a lot of jobs. People that understand the technology and they can deploy it in a specific domain. The other thing will be that we'll need a lot of education for people that are using it. There is a kind of ambiguity among people, among users. We're using it all the time, but we don't know what it's doing. So we need a lot of work there. People that can educate communities about the applications, about the implications of these technologies. And we'll need translators, I guess, people that understand the technologies and understand businesses, decision makers, and can translate all the implications and the applications to decision makers. So we'll see a lot of jobs like this. And I think this is where we're going. Especially like in my domain, in the technical domain, there will be a lot of work to be done on customizing these open source technologies to specific tasks.
So I'm going to ask, how many people are Star Trek fans here? Can you guys put your hands up? Yeah, so I'm setting you guys up. So in Star Trek, no one gets paid anything. They work the jobs they like, right? They do that with basically a guaranteed basic income. So I think that this is a very strong argument for why we need a guaranteed basic income. Is if we're going down a super technical path, we don't have replicators yet, but we've got 3D printers. We can start to have a conversation about guaranteed basic income in an informed way. I think the other piece of that is artificial intelligence or machine learning companies probably need to bear some of the financial burden there. And I recognize this is not a super popular opinion for my investors, but I do genuinely believe that we maybe need to pay some of the cost of this. So if I automate someone out of a job, which I don't think is super likely right now, but it's more likely I just augment their position and make them a little more effective. But if I replace someone's job, I probably need to pay some sort of tax around that. I don't think it's a huge burden to ask when margins in the tech industry are 80%. So if you think about how much money you stand to make, maybe we could make just like a little less and take care of the people who are much less fortunate than we are. But that's a pretty extreme view, maybe. So.
Can I just add something on that? I just read something yesterday, which I'm just going to pick up on it because I found it really interesting. It was True North by Ipsos. This survey that went out to 2,000 Canadians. It's probably the one that I hadn't seen a lot that had this much detail of surveying Canadians and what they felt about technology. And this one's about data belonging to citizens, so about giving a charge. 74% of Canadians felt that if manufacturers were going to use their data to sell them products or give their data to others, they should be getting a portion of that money. Right? That's pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, it was a really, I might cite other of these, but this is the debate, right? If data is you and you are your data, what does that then mean when data is being used with or without your consent?
Well, I think we'll have to embrace the reality. In the current situation, the data-driven companies, I believe, will be consistently outperforming the companies which are non-data driven. And why is it so? Because currently now we make decisions on the fly. So you quickly make a decision and then move. And during my grandfather's day, he joined, I think he was in government, and then he retired from that. And when during my father's days, he worked for a company. The company often went on strike, and he didn't know whether he is going to have a job or not. And in my time, I got laid off once already. So it was during the boom time when we all believed that this century is going to be full of optics. And it turned out to be, it is full of data. So when the bubble broke, I lost my job. And so it is not about stability, it is all about agility. That's where we are now sitting, where the ones, in general, agility matters more than stability for all of us. So if we sit back and then say that, well, I am not willing to embrace what's going on, I think the bus has already left. So be it government, be it defense, be it education, be it healthcare, or be it even our own household, we have to embrace this change. Because now I think the best way to communicate with my son is through Facebook, or maybe through Instagram, or through, there is no FaceTime at all. So we say we are all connected, but at the end we are not. So that's the reality. And if this is the case, then we need to ask, how do we make wealth? So the wealth is now probably the knowledge that is in the data. And that's where we are all going, be the professors. For instance, now, when I was doing my graduate study, I took an entire course on neural networks. I learned the math of it and then implemented it. Now I give it to my graduate students. The first thing that they do is look at Google and then see from where they can download any of this open source. They download it, and within 3 days, they come out with a solution. And that solution is darn good. But then you ask yourself, do they really understand what's going on? The answer is a no. But that's the reality. So I now embrace the reality, saying that yes, if you can get it from a downloadable source, download it, give them the credit. But then tell me how it works, and then make subtle changes to the program, and then see how it varies. So in education as well, we see that that's what is happening. So everything is available. So for instance, in MATLAB, if you go into MATLAB, such of us who know MATLAB, everything is available. So data in, data out. You give garbage, you get garbage, but that garbage students will come back and say, this is the result. And that's the reality. So as professors now, we need to accept that that's how it is going to go. And the change happens when we bring in practices which will change how they are going to think. And I think in the society too, we'll have to bring in some changes where we embrace this, maybe in the form of policies, how to respect privacy, to whom does the data belong? If I generate the data, should it not belong to me? It should. So now Europe has come out with this policy, right? GDPR, I guess. So as to how we should deal with the data. So essentially, at the end of the day, it's always the guy with the money wins.
Thank you. I want to shift to another topic, which is going to be very controversial, related to the adoption of AI. And there are 4 elements that are really considered the headwinds to adoption of AI. Basically, the black box syndrome, privacy, bias, and the biggest question is ethical. And we know what happened with Cambridge Analytica and the whole notion, if you are in a single car, automatic car that is driverless car, and you see a child versus an adult, who do you hit, the child or the adult? So this ethical aspect, I would like you to comment on these 4 elements, and how do you see that stopping or slowing down the whole issue of AI adoption? Start with Valerie.
Thank you.
It's a very easy question.
Child or adult, is that the first test? Yeah, these are tough questions, right? So it's what we found in working with AI is that we find it effective for very, very narrow use cases. And we need to have that transparency. We want to understand how it came to the result that it came to. I think that's critical for success, to be able to trace back and be able to say, okay, I understand how I got this result, and I understand if I'm not happy with this result, then what are some of the things I need to feed in to make this something that I can be more comfortable with. I don't think that companies should get to decide adult or child. I don't know if it's Mercedes, but one of them has come out and said our self-driving car will always protect the driver. So it's happy to run over 1,000 children, if that's what it takes. And that's not okay, right? It's not okay that if I'm driving a Volkswagen, I'll be killed, but if you're driving a Mercedes, you're fine. So these are all the ethical questions that we have to grapple with as a society. And I think folks need to get their heads around their data. As you had said, do we own our data or not? What is the price of convenience? So I give up the keys to the kingdom so that I only have to log on once. I'm curious about why my hair color is the way it is, so I'll just give somebody my DNA. And do you read the terms and conditions? We're not set up for success because it's about 75 pages on your iPhone, and God knows, right? Like, you're going to run out of physical strength before you can get through all of that. But so do governments hold companies to account, as they've started to do in Europe? And we will, I think, hit an inflection point around some of this because folks are fed up. Cambridge Analytica, folks, I found on my Facebook, people stopped liking stuff, people stopped commenting. The amount of traffic on that platform, at least in my experience, is down by about 80%. And then there are legal and ethical questions around if Facebook knew they had 500 million fake accounts, why did they not act earlier? Well, it's nice to be able to say to an advertiser, I have X number of users that I'm putting your ads in front of. So I think these are all questions that we have to start asking as a society around transparency in AI, transparency around use of our data, and then all of these platforms. Right? If you have children, educate them. Instagram is not a social platform. It's an advertising platform. And we haven't had any of these conversations. And as you say, we go where everyone is. That's what business does. That's what individuals do, is you're going to interact with folks where they are. And I think to a certain point, we have to start pulling some of that back and having more meaningful social interactions. And AI threatens to make that worse. If we decide that we're going to treat those algorithms the same way we've treated everything else and just say, well, they're there, they work, I don't want to think about them, I don't want to question them, I think that's a dangerous point of view.
Yeah, I'd like to address this question in context of natural language processing, because that's where I work right now. So as I said, the technology has improved a lot. We have really neural networks right now, the state-of-the-art algorithms for learning language. They are designed to learn the common sense meaning of words from Wikipedia, from the context. They are designed to learn the meaning of a sequence, which is our sentences. There are technologies that can tell you what are the most important, informative words in a context. So we are going towards that level of understanding language in different layers. There's a lot of limitations. I'm not saying that we are there yet. But we have the capacity of learning meaning of language in different layers. But then when you have this technology and you train it with some sort of data, the trained model is as good as your data. The way we train these things is that, I can give you an example. We trained a classifier, we call it, that can go on social media, look at comments, and tell you how toxic that comment is. It could be insulting, threatening, toxic. It will label that piece of text. We trained it with 100K examples, and each example was labeled as some of these labels that I just mentioned. We trained it with this 100K examples. So the model that we have is as good as the training data, and it's really hard to say how much variety we had in this data. This is subjective. If you ask people to label these comments, even two human beings will not agree on the labels. This is subjective. This is very, very complex, and it's very hard to say how good our data was. So as technical people, I think it's our ethical responsibility to communicate with the users that how much we know about our data, what are the limitations of our data set and our the system that we built. But even that is not that easy because we don't know. It's subjective. It's really hard to measure that. In many areas of machine learning, you can have a benchmark and you can have a quantitative metric of how good your system is. That's really impossible for natural language processing because it's very, very subjective. So the real true feedback that we'll get is from users, it's user experience. We'll try to communicate the limitations of the model with user, but we don't know, we're not sure about it. So I would say at this point of time, the real solution to address this problem is to look at these models as very, as you just said, very narrow, specific applications, trying to understand the limitations, and then we should really try to look at these systems as recommendation systems, as filtering system, not like system that will make very critical strategic decisions for us.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the challenges are mostly focused around data access. And so using the Cambridge Analytica example, I'll share an opinion I hold that's probably not super popular, which is I wasn't surprised at all and it didn't really bother me. And why I wasn't surprised at all is I've run a Facebook ad campaign in my life. If you've ever played around with their advertising tool, I can still back all of the information Cambridge Analytica had out of Facebook's platform at a very cost-effective rate. I can probably get it for around 10 cents a user. So you can build your profiles, you can run your campaigns, and you can drive them to a site, and I can track who clicked. So I don't think anything's changed. I think what changed is people suddenly realized how effective digital marketing can be when used for these purposes. A little anecdote, we ran like a divorce website, so you could get divorced online. I could buy a profile for about 10 cents a click and almost guarantee that they'd use the product. The profile, by the way, was women aged 55 plus who had their status listed as separated or it's complicated and lived in the GTA. So I can do the same for any of you. I can create a campaign that will segment this room into all the different interesting populations. Nothing's changed. What has changed is people are suddenly conscious of it. I think the other side of that coin, though, is Facebook, Google, Amazon have these massive data monopolies that right now small companies can't get access to. So, Amazon publishes a paper saying that their speech recognition is best in the world. We met with them 2 weeks ago, and our sole ask was not like, give us your algorithm. It wasn't, let us talk to your scientists. It was, let us see your data so we can try it on ours. We think we're better than them, but we have no way to prove it because we're working on two different data sets. And so machine learning has this like fundamental problem right now around reproducibility in some of these areas. because Google will work on Google's data set and not make it open. Amazon will work on Amazon's data set and not make it open. And the problem is, yeah, like they can say that their subjective measure is better, but we can't prove it. And that's where it ceases to be science, in my opinion, is we can't actually run the same experiment and say it produces the same result. And so I think like to tie that into the sort of four themes, all of the ethics is inevitably going to get bundled up into access to those data sets that no conventional citizen currently has. So we should consider breaking those monopolies or at least addressing it through government funding.
Well, I'll be controversial here, I guess. Okay, let me start with this. Some time back, I came to understand through other sources with the fact how things work in India with respect to Facebook. For some reason, the metrics in Facebook is the so-called like. And so the more likes you have, you're supposed to be quite famous. So in India, there are organizations to which you can pay a lot of money, and then you can put your picture or whatever you're doing, and then you can buy likes. So that has become one industry, new industry. So we are talking about making wealth. Maybe that's where we all should be. And then if you look at what is happening is that, in a way, I believe that we have become slaves to the algorithms. So whatever the algorithm does, we just take it as is because it is the master. So it does whatever it wants, and then we want to follow that. As an example, let me tell you this. So we have the autocorrects on the emails in your phone. So generally, I turn that off, and once in a while, I will leave it like that. And this becomes very dangerous when you send an email to your wife. So once I said, "Dear wife," and then it said, "Dead wife." And this really happened. And then you know what would have happened following that. What I'm saying is that when the control goes into the algorithms, and the algorithms are allowed to do whatever it thinks it is right so we will have all kinds of issues, starting from ethical issues down to issues which will lead to divorce. And then I need to go back to Sam's idea of having a new way of getting a partner. Nevertheless, when ethics comes into picture, I believe that AI plays a different role. Let's pretend that I am a white supremacist, I hate gays, and I don't like black people. And I go after some websites which promote this. So the recommender system recognizes this, and the next time that I go on looking for that, it recommends few of those websites. So as a matter of fact, instead of correcting my view, it is now driving me into the way where I need to be, and that gets Trump elected. So let us ask this question: where was ethics? Gone to the drain. So ethics has changed now. If I don't like anything, I can call it fake news, and everybody agrees to that. Why? Because we let it happen, because we became slaves to algorithms. And so if we sit back and ask a question, where the problem is not with AI. The problem is not with data either. The problem is how we program the whole thing and how we drive it. So if my cost function asks it to do one thing, and then every training is supposed to do that, why should I blame AI for being unethical? I am unethical because I did not think through it. And so that is my case.
Tara, this is your specialty on privacy.
All right. Fair points. Where to go from here? So I guess, based on all of that, I agree, and what everybody said. So we've heard about data and data privacy, data monopolies. For me, it's a lot of, this feeds into whether or not the population is going to trust the AI, the technologies, the systems that are being applied to them. And when that trust is fractured, we've got a bit of an issue, no matter what's happening. So from a government perspective, some of the questions then that I ask people, so the suggestion about, I agree that it's, there's the data, there's the algorithms, then the question is, should there be some type of oversight mechanism to ensure that there are thresholds or the ways that the algorithms are designed. This is opening up the black box and all that. But should there be some neutral third party that has oversight over algorithms to make sure that they are designed in a particular way? Should the data that's being used, also ensure that it is representative of certain populations? What deems it to be suitable data to then train the systems? And who provides that function? Do people want governments to provide that function? This is literally where we are in this conversation right now today. That is where we're at. All the scandals that have been mentioned have brought it to the awareness of people beyond just the people in this room that are most likely a little more tech savvy than the average population. But it has actually woken up the population and said, what's going on? What's going on to me? What's happening? And people, the trust has started to be fractured. And so people jump right away to, well, government should legislate. I come back and I say, is that truly what you're asking? The threshold to actually legislate is very, very high. What are all the steps in between that should be taken into consideration? And how can we have a meaningful conversation to get there? And so that is the space that we live in right now, and I would challenge and I ask people to think about what that looks like. What does it mean to sort of rebuild the trust? And just one other pitch on why we come from a human rights perspective. Again, we can talk about ethics in a Canadian context. We could talk about ethics in a North American context. But ethics are not necessarily shared and defined the same way around the world. And technology is spread around the world, right? Developed here, spread there, I've said it a million times. So we come at it from a human rights framework. The International Human Rights Framework is defined. It's a known framework. And so we try and look at that and what are the human rights implications, which includes privacy and different impacts. So that's why we've come from that angle rather than ethics, but they come very close together. And so we try and benefit from the studies on ethical AI.
Thank you. What I would like to do now is to open the session for Q&A. So do we have any questions from the floor?
Hi, so this is kind of a vague, perhaps more theoretical issue. So, but I think I have got people from various backgrounds sitting here who will be probably able to address this issue quite well, and I'm not going to let this chance go. So the question is, can you teach a machine to be ethical? So the scientist in me says, why not? It's data. You take good data and feed it. It'll probably become ethical. So anyway, I have my answers, but I would like to hear your views. So is it possible for a machine to be taught to be ethical, or is it an oxymoron?
Who wants to take this answer first?
So I don't mind I'll start, but I'm sure there'll be much more context added by my fellow panelists. So I think, and back to what my colleagues here were saying, so AI allows you to do anything at scale, right? You can personalize at scale, you can discriminate at scale, you can be ethical at scale. And where it gets really, really difficult is what is the ground truth that you use to train the system on? Because my ground truth and my set of ethics are going to be different than your set of ethics. And once you do this at scale, so your earlier comment about immigration officials and border agents, I'm less troubled if there's one person who's doing that incorrectly. I'm more troubled if that's embedded into an algorithm, and this is just now how we do it. So the real challenge is, what is the ground truth? So who decides what that corpus of information is? What are those rules? Is it you hit the child, you hit the adult, you protect the driver? I think most people would be uncomfortable with government doing that because it depends on the flavor of the day. Would you really want Donald Trump setting that ground truth? Not to be political, but I'm not sure everybody would be comfortable with that. So how do we get there? How do we get to a place where we establish what is an ethical ground truth? My answer is we have to figure out what we base it on. And are we comfortable as a society setting a set of rules? Is it just for us with the spread of technology? Is our ground truth the same as the ground truth for everybody in Africa, everybody in China, everybody in different places and cultures and religions? It's difficult.
by a case statement in a program.
Sure.
Thanks. Next question.
So I was impressed. That, anyway, that you talked about not just knowledge workers and people who use their brains being out of work, but the people who are good with their hands and other parts of their body. But the suggestions for new jobs that were created were all for people who use their brains. And the only suggestion for people who are good with their hands and with other things was to raise taxes to pay them to stay home. And bread and circuses worked so well for the Roman system, and since those people will be voting, they'll be voting for more money to stay home and be entertained. Are there any other suggestions out there?
Samuel, that's
Yeah,
like your...
I'm not sure I want them to stay home. I was more implying, like, if you like Star Trek, they get to do what they like, and they choose to explore the galaxy. That's a great future.
That's
I-
only-
That person.
yeah, I
sorry.
want that job
Yeah,
too.
I want to be that
Yeah,
person.
but like, there's doctors on the ship, there's security on the ship.
Those are, but to get into Starfleet, you have to be smarter than Wesley Crusher. And they have gold press latinum. So
Yeah.
that universe is the same. Actually, I was thinking more for, because we're coming from the same world, but I'm not on the art side so much, which worry more about people. So is anybody actually thinking of something other than than giving everybody a standard income around the world so they don't feel bad while all the techies take over, get all the money?
But I think that technology, like, we're not immune, right?
No,
Like,
we're not. Absolutely not. But
engineering talent's going to get pushed out just like everything else.
I am now discovering ageism, which will happen to all of us. However, I am really curious about, there is a list of problems. There was only solutions on one side, except for one generic solution, which I had concerns about. So I have a rough idea where you're coming from. I have no real good idea what's happening in the people who spend all their time worrying about human rights and about how people in third world countries are being affected by this, if they're suggesting anything more than just that.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the basic income suggestion, I have heard that, and I really would see that that would apply more in Western societies. I can't see, like, there's a lot of governments that couldn't even take that on. I think that's sort of a Canadian, well, anyways, I don't think that is a global solution. Let me put it that way. I think it's a very narrow perspective and at our disposal, maybe. But other things that we're thinking about is how do you actually, what is education? Education is in a whole area. I actually don't think AI is going to roll out all over the world and all those low-skill, low-paying jobs are going to disappear. I do agree that some of the movement is going to happen with potentially call centers and different things like that. But agricultural work, a lot of that could be improved.
It's all robotic. That's turning into robots now.
It could be improved in a lot, but not all countries will have that at their disposal, I guess, is what I'm saying.
They're being bought up
So-
by Monsanto.
Yeah. Well, then you've got into the whole other a lot of the questions that people aren't paying attention to is who is buying into all of the different countries around the world and where does that power sit? And that starts to change global dynamics.
So you
but
don't
that's
really
a-
have suggestions for them? Because so not everybody can be trained knowledge. Sorry.
I see a lot of people, a lot
Yes.
of people asking questions, so if you don't mind, I'm going to move to the next one.
Hey, what do you guys think about the ethics of inheriting data from your parents and otherwise?
Inheriting data from your parents?
Yeah, so your parents' data gets collated to your data, and then they draw conclusions on you based on your parents' data and actions.
My immediate reaction is I'm terrified. Yeah. Knowing the data that could exist on my parents. But I think that comes to what I was mentioning earlier, all these questions about, like, what does it mean to be your data? And how far can you push that? Like in China, they're doing a lot of social manipulation and tracking based not only like my data, but then anyone that I'm associated with. So this credit system that people may be aware of, like it's not just your parents. It's then about if you're my friend and you go and say something, I will get points deducted from me, and that'll impact whether I can get a job. I mean, these things are mind-boggling to me. But of course, I have a real nervousness around that. I'm not a big fan of those sort of, because it's about the person, and how does a person own their information in today's world, I think, are the questions that we're struggling with.
Thank you, Tara. Next question.
Hello. My question is about being a data citizen and contributing data to like public companies versus having the data in like a centralized body like Canada or something. How should we feel about like our data privacy, and as well as should we like personally, what I'm trying to ask is my data, like I feel like Google knows all about me, but like I feel like the government should know about me if they wanted to target and analyze more about Canadians. So it's just more of the question would be, should we be safe? Should we be scared about people knowing about us, or should we just be, I don't know how to act about this, because I feel like my data is publicly available, and you know what I mean? I'm just not sure.
Who wants to take this? Who wants to take this?
I think everyone has something to hide. That would be my statement. You may think you don't, but you do. And if you don't believe me, come find me after. I'd love to open your phone. We can go through your email. And there's your answer, is everyone got uncomfortable when I said that. And if you're not uncomfortable yet, let me see your bank account. We can drill down and make people uncomfortable by looking too much at them. I think everyone should have privacy. I think it's why we need strong encryption, and I think it's why that is a part of this discussion, is if you give your stuff up for free, whether it's to Facebook, Instagram, or Google, you need to keep a little bit to yourself, because otherwise you relinquish your autonomy.
Thank you, Samuel. Next question.
Hi. So mine is in the context of like Facebook and Google and these big companies, right? Hate and outrage and things like that, they get a lot more attention, they get more clicks. So then you get more of that, and it kind of perpetuates racism, bigotry, and all of the above. And that's something that, it's kind of like the Wild West, the internet. I mean, that's how I feel. And is there any oversight? Are we doing anything like in your respective fields that you can see to maybe, I don't want to say police, but there's a difference between hate speech and free speech. And these giant machines like Facebook and Google are perpetuating these machines by giving people a platform to spread that. And in your opinion, is there things that we can do now, and are there things that we're going to be doing in the future to relinquish that?
Isa, you want to take this?
I'm not sure I'm the best one to tackle this. Because
I'll start.
I
I would only, and then I'll pass it to you. I would only say that I don't think that I think watching Mark Zuckerberg be interviewed by Congress was the saddest and most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. You know, where you have lawmakers and people who typically would weigh in on this stuff that don't really understand how the internet works. How does Facebook make money? Really? So it is the Wild West. I agree. The ones we see, and then you go on things like Reddit and 4chan and 8chan, this is even worse. And there's a manipulation, right? Because not only do we have the authentic behavior that's going on that we find disturbing, but some social media platforms are now throttling likes. So if I like something, they won't put that like on yet because they want you to come back and check later, so that you come back and come back. They're creating this almost addictive personality on folks. There is a lot of what you were describing, which is if I have a point of view, then they're going to feed me that point of view until I only have that point of view. So I think something that started out as having all kinds of capability to connect people and have a global community and help us to understand deeper folks that aren't sitting in front of us has turned out to be a massively manipulated advertising platform. And I'm not sure what we do about it. Maybe our friends in government have better ideas.
Got this all sorted out. Just got to get back to the office. Yeah, it's a little overwhelming. But so we have done a lot of work around online hate, trying to understand the online and offline dimensions. And to speak about, yes, it was a little shocking to watch the interview of Zuckerberg. Policymakers, this is not a comfort zone, right? This is not where the predominance of policymakers have a background. So a lot of our work is not only trying to push the international conversation, so we've actually got a resolution going forward to the Human Rights Council in a couple of weeks on tech-enabled violence against women. So people can understand what that is and what it looks like, and some shocking pushback by other people saying like that it doesn't exist, but you always have to push the international conversations so that people understand what it is. And we do that around the online, offline. Again, we've had people say, well, if you're getting harassed online, just turn it off. That is not an option. That is social exclusion in today's world. You can't do anything today. In many, many countries, it was an enabler. The internet was an enabler. It was about bringing communities together. If people don't have an ability to express their voices and opinions and engage in political life in their communities without knowing that they have their own privacy and they can be protected, the ramifications are massive, and we've seen these ramifications. So, no, I don't have the answer. We're working on it. But this is what we try and work on, and from our perspective at Global Affairs, it's trying to push the international dialogue to say these issues about tech-enabled violence, on and offline dimensions, the link between your person and the digital world, those conversations have to be leveraged.
Thank you, Tara. Next question. Go ahead.
Okay. My own impression, we have to make sure that AI will produce something that is supporting humankind in general. You could make AI for the hell for us. However, since we're able to make it about anything, let's make it correctly at the first level. So ethically, we have to find something that is more universal, and then maybe encourage government to get involved in making these some rules and make sure that these algorithms will have some level of fairness. As the algorithm will evolve, and I will hope AI will become a little bit smarter, then it's like when you have a child, there is some level of education. Child could do something terrible, but on the other hand, if they are well, let's say, trained, they will do something extraordinary, unbelievable. Let's make AI something like that. A good behavior and a support for the future of us. And I will consider that people will be afraid, okay, maybe it will be the government involved. Will it be like a big brother? Big brother? And then I don't think so. We have to strike a balance between some level of supervision of the evolution of the algorithms, so the algorithms will produce something that is more positive than negative over time. That's my opinion.
Okay,
I
thank
can
you.
take that question.
I think that was a statement.
I have a comment on this is a very, very valid point, but I think one of the limitations that we're facing right now towards going that ideal is the technological limitations that we have. Despite all the improvements that we've made, what you're talking about is a system, is an AI system that is learning all the time and relearning all the time, is monitoring all the data in the world and is adapting to this data. When you're talking about social challenges, or even when we're talking about language, these are live entities, that these change all the time. So the technology that is able to monitor all this data and relearn in real time and be deployed at the same time, we're not there yet. We don't have the technology.
No, I understand. We need more capability to make that happen.
Exactly.
Last final question.
My question is wondering if you could speak to data literacy and spreading the knowledge of the people providing the data so that the farmer in Africa or the CEO making the decisions can understand what they're providing or how they're impacted by that by the data or by the algorithms, so they can maybe be critical or ask questions. So I was wondering if you could speak to informing the literacy of people.
Yeah, again, I go back to the quote by T.S. Eliot, because there is a lot of wisdom in that. So he asked this, where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? So the question that he's asking is, so we do not want, this is something that we should note, we do not want devices to be collecting the data and then presenting the data to the people. Then people are like spectators. It's like you sitting down and watching hockey. Yes, you get thrilled, but then you need to be there in the hockey game to feel how it is to be in that game. So most of the times what happens is that when we create a program or we write a program or we develop a system, we are not part of it. You know what I'm saying? So if I have to provide a solution for Africans, I better go and then feel how it is to be in that area and the solution that I'm providing, whether it's going to be useful. So if I sit here in North America and then say that, okay, here is a solution that I'm providing to them, I don't think that solution will be that useful. So unless we are able to imbibe what's going on there, understand, and then provide a solution, that solution is going to be useless. That's my view. And most of the things that we are seeing here is that we provide a solution because it's quick bucks. Look at how many applications have come, apps. Apps come today and apps vanish. And you make plenty of money and then you also vanish. Isn't that what is happening here? So the idea is, as I said, it is all about agility. All we are looking at how quickly we can get things done, how quickly it can be to the market, and how quickly I can make money and then vanish. So it is not, we don't take people-centric approach where we put and ask a question, how can I make people's need set to be the front and the center of the problem? And I think if we do that, I think we'll have a good solution. That's my view.
Thank you. Those of you who did not make, yeah?
Google made around the world sampling of all these things that you're talking about, so to make sure that product will match the culture in the various countries. So there are some organizations that try to make that happen.
We need to have more of that. That's what I'm trying to say.
Before I thank the panel, I just want, if you can come after and ask to the panel directly, because I think that we want to make sure that the program is moving. But my concluding remarks are, I'm going to start with what I started the first sentence at the first slide. What Andrew Ng talked about, the impact of AI is going to be the equivalent to the impact of electricity. But what I would like to share with you, if we look at singularity, which our pundit talking about the year 2045, where we are now, it's a marathon, and we are the first 100 meter of this marathon. As you heard from the panel, the road is complicated. The journey has a lot of areas to cover, both from technology, from ethics. We haven't solved everything, so it's a road that we're going to travel together for the next 30, 40 years, and we don't know where it's going to lead. We know sometimes we look at singularity, but we are not there yet by far. Thank you very much for the panel, for the time that you put together. It was really very rewarding. I enjoyed it a lot.
And a special thanks to Eli for waking us up and the panel. Before we disappear for lunch, we have an extra little session for you. I'd like to call on John Reed, who is the CEO of Canadian Advanced Technology Association, CATA, to make a few comments.
Yeah, a surprise, it's not my award. I'd be remiss to not mention and thank the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs, who back in the 1970s gave me a scholarship and then a stipend to study in Paris that allowed me to start my career debt-free. And I appreciate that. The more scholarships, the better, because I understand how difficult and expensive it is to get an education. I think the AI Leader of the Year award, we're presenting it for the first time at Data Day 5. It's certainly fitting. We've been 5 years working with John on this. And I'd like to share with you some of the criteria. I won't go into all the detail. The new AI Leader of the Year award is presented to an individual from the public or private sector in recognition of their role in advancing the frontiers of AI development. The recipient will have demonstrated consistent leadership, resulting in the creation and international acceptance of a world-class product or service that is solving a real problem. And I think this is perhaps the most important criteria. The winner will be recognized for his or her community engagement and also their involvement in helping create public policy, their active role in speaking to the community on issues and engaging in important discussions such as the ones that we're having today. And I wanted to call on John Apseman to present the award. I worked with John for many years, and I also want to give a shout out for all the work that he's done in advancing the excellence of Carleton University. So John, I will leave you my notes, and you can announce the winner.
So this is the inaugural AI Leader of the Year award, and it goes to Victor Años. Where are you? Victor is the co-founder and CTO of, believe it or not, Data for Good. After hearing all this before, we still have Data for Good. So Victor studied computer science, math, and physics at the University of Toronto, and developed quickly a career in hardware, networking, engineering, IT security, at places such as Sun Microsystems, HSBC, and Shaw Media. A pretty good career. Then he transitioned to the startup world for companies such as Tritonware, Demand Hub, and a number of others. He now contributes his experience and expertise at deep learning and dedicates most of his time teaching his craft to the Toronto community, and I mean community is writ large. And by doing this, he co-founded Data for Good, which is a not-for-profit with over 2,500 volunteers across the country. The Data for Good Canada organization maintains a notable and influential voice within a global community based on social issues and putting a Keep Canada Place on the map. You recognize the many of the partners that is within Data for Good's sphere of influence. Second Harvest Toronto, UNICEF Canada, the Calgary Distress Centre, the Teddy Fox Foundation, Ottawa Food Bank, Commuter Challenge. I could go on and on and on. It's a fabulous list. Victor's 5 year of active involvement in Data for Good Canada has enriched the lives of many people and set a high standard for community services, and is actually very deserving then of this, for his significant contributions, of this inaugural award. Victor?
Hi, everyone. So this journey has been going on, I think, my whole life. It's always been a data play in my career. There's never been a time where I didn't understand that data would be the answer. And yes, governing it properly and making sure that we're all responsible and ethical with it is a big ask. And I've been on chats and talks before regarding some of these issues where people have put forth ideas such as like a UN council of sorts. I don't know if government is the right answer. I don't know if regular citizens are the right answer, but there is an answer. And I think just like the electricity comment, we really are at a nation state of AI. And as we get more and more sophisticated as a society, a culture, and a world around AI and the data and all the insight that comes from it, I think we'll do a lot of good. And that's part of the reason that Data for Good exists, is that we continue pushing forth the idea that data is there for good and that you don't always have to worry about paying yourself with advertising dollars. Thank you very much.
So this is a real test for your natural intelligence. Find lunch. Out of the door on the left, and it's upstairs. We will reconvene here at 2 o'clock. But before that, please visit with our sponsors and visit some of the posters, and we'll see you there soon.